Welcome to the Football Autobiography Show. It is such a pleasure to be with you all today. I am your host, Josh Schneider-Weiler, and today we have a special episode. Normally we take you on a trip or a journey with a person throughout their entire career, but our guest today is a rather young guy. His name is Daniel Fieldsend, and he's only in his late 20s. So instead of taking you on a journey throughout his entire career, we're going to take you on a journey of a special 3 months of his. He is the author of The European Game, and that book is about his 3-month trip around Europe, from the Netherlands to Spain, Portugal, Italy, Germany. So we really delve into what he learned on his trip going to some of the biggest and best academies throughout Europe, whether it's Benfica, Bayern Munich, PSG. So we get into a lot of different subjects, such as how Vitor Frade revolutionized football, the beautiful facilities of Benfica, Filippo Galli's view on football and football education, the importance of video analysts, how Athletic Bilbao lives by a concept of 3 + 4 = 1, and psychogeography and how teams can use it to their advantage. So we touch on a lot of interesting topics. He's a really interesting guy. He saw a lot while he was on his travels. I really hope you enjoy it. And the upcoming music is by the artist Brother CJ. So without further ado, sit back and enjoy the episode.
I keep on running. I keep on running. I keep on running. Running, non-stop till they out of breath. Putting in about 1,000 reps. Addicted to the grind like a pound of meth. Tonight I rock my line of how I climb the best.
I'm here with Daniel Fieldsend, author of The European Game. It's such a pleasure. We're actually in a bar called Ye Hole in the Wall. Mm-hmm. That's, as you said, older than America.
It is 1700s,
and it's an absolute pleasure to be with you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, mate. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here up in Liverpool for the first time. Before we get into into the book and some of the adventures you had in the book, can you tell the people a little bit about your upbringing? Where are you from?
So yeah, I'm from Liverpool, and coming from Liverpool, football is inescapable. It's the overwhelming passion of the city, and because of that, I later wanted to define my life by football and work in the game. I never knew anything else. And it's the pipe dream for all young guys in Liverpool that they want to either be a footballer or a football coach. So I was fortunate that when I came to do my degree in university, there was a football studies course on, which has later moved down to Southampton. I did that. I got my degree in football, and then I went on to coach for Liverpool at the academy, doing bits and pieces and scouting as well. So everything that I've done in my life, because I'm from Liverpool, has been tailored towards football.
So I mean, it's every bit as much a part of your identity as just where you're from. Football in it of itself.
Yeah, and I was saying to you a little bit earlier that, you know, a lot of these port cities, there's small communities. So if you go to Rotterdam, despite it being this huge place, it's Rotterdam identity. It's not, they don't associate themselves as Dutch. Same if you go to Marseille, it's Marseille first and France second. Liverpool echoes that a lot, but Liverpool reinforces that through football, and the first thing that any scouser will tell you is who they support. It's very rare that you'll meet a guy who's from Liverpool and you ask him who he supports, and he says, I don't like football. It just doesn't happen here.
Well, I mean, I'll definitely be on the lookout, after this podcast when I venture around the city, and I'll go up to a couple people and see if I can find the lone person.
It'll make a fool out of me. Everyone will say it now.
So you mentioned the book. The European Game, which I've read in the last week, which is a really good book, and I'm not just sucking up to you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank
you. Can you tell the people out there who haven't read it what it is about?
So most football books, they describe something, a biography, or they're from the outside looking in. The European Game is actually from the inside, and it's about football. It's about what staff members do day to day. It's about the techniques that bring clubs success. And as well as doing that, the book will also describe an outline of each club and the area and how the area influences the way clubs operate. And it's really quite interesting. And these were the findings I was getting. It was really quite interesting that clubs do look at their local area and use that kind of geography to influence the way that they work.
Yeah. So can you give an example of, I believe the term you used was psychogeography. Not that you coined that term, but can you give an example of that psychogeography?
Yeah, so psychogeography is an academic field. It's just never been applied to football. And in psychogeography, it's a mutual relationship between people and place, and how, for instance, how place and the geography of an environment can shape the mentality of a person or a group of people. So if we think about Marseille, it is a cul-de-sac town looking out to sea, and there's a paranoia within the city because of that. Or Barcelona is protected by mountains at the back, and they just look out to the Mediterranean, and they've got this localized identity rather than national. And clubs, so let's stick with Barcelona. So because of that, because of the Catalan pride, because of how important it is to be from this area, the way the clubs operate are shaped to promote Catalan nationalism by playing guys from La Masia. So maybe not that Iniesta is he's not from Catalonia, but you have Piqué, you have Puyol, you have guys like that, Xavi, who are there to promote Catalan nationalism. It's the same when we went to Rotterdam, that the club want to then bring these players through who represent the city. In that, local Rotterdammers are tough, they are working class guys, and their players represent that. They train them to never play inside. They're not pampered at all. If it hailstones, they're out in the hail, they have the wind in their face. And it's interesting that clubs do that. Now, that's something, the one thing I'd say for clubs in Britain to enforce in their academies is something like that. So if you're an academy manager, you go to the club, you have a look what makes the local environment unique, and you try and shape that.
Do any, you mentioned in England or in the UK, clubs could do this. Are there any clubs in particular that jump out that there would be prime examples for? I mean, you mentioned Liverpool. I mean, you're from here. You know this the best. But is there Liverpool or just otherwise? Are there places that jump out at you that could have this advantage?
So first of all, we've got to think of areas in the UK that have strong and unique mentalities and identities. So you have Glasgow, and most definitely Celtic should be looking to promote tough Glaswegian guys the way their academy is. I've never been to Glasgow Celtic, but also if we mention maybe Everton and Liverpool, there's a lot of parallels between Liverpool as a city and Marseille and Rotterdam and places like that we could look to promote that. The only issue is the way that the game has gone in Britain. So let's think back to these trademark Scouse players. You had a young Gerrard, a young Carragher, a young Rooney, and they had this grit and this desire, which sometimes heated over into aggressiveness. And the way that the game has gone in England is that we can't really have that. So now we have more sanitised young Scouse players coming through, like Ross Barkley, for example, who's a great talent. But there is, and sometimes he goes a little bit over the edge. If you look in the derby, the way he is. So it's tough. It's a fine line for clubs to promote that real Scouse grit and desire, and that not to become outright aggression. You know what I mean, Josh?
Yeah, no, it's a difficult line to toe, but I mean it's it's something that I think teams should look for, just because, especially after reading your book, just because that's the natural advantage that they have that their competitors can't get over them. I mean, if you want to talk technical players, you can get a technical player from Brazil or Spain or where have you, but the one advantage you have as a club like Liverpool or in Glasgow like Celtic is you have that natural pride that in the book you mentioned with Athletic Bilbao that you can't replicate, and that even if you sign a guy, he can't bring you because it's not the same. So I would totally agree with that, and that Athletic Bilbao really that chapter really stuck with me. I loved actually, just to mention that you had a line in there that I didn't know before, but the 3 provinces in Spain and then the 4 provinces in France, the 3 + 4 = 1.
Yeah.
And I love that little line that you had in there. It was something I hadn't heard before, and I thought was spectacular.
I remember seeing that. So the 3 provinces equal, and the 2 in Spain, in France, sorry, they all equal 1 Basque country.
Yeah.
Which is what they want. And it's so fascinating to go to Bilbao and go to Athletic and see how they actually reinforce and teach that to the kids. And they're not bashful about it. This is something that they do. They teach their youngsters who are trained and educated at the academy that the Basque region was previously oppressed and still continues to be so in many ways. So from doing that, they have these guys who know that representing Athletic Bilbao is everything. And why would they want to leave? Because they have a duty as Basque sons to represent the region. And it's so clever that the club actually promote it like this. And they're not drawing on unwanted violence. Obviously, there was a history in the Basque region with terrorism and ETA. That's not what they're educating the kids about. They're talking previously and more earlier than that. And basically, they're saying to the kids that you are from the Basque region, you should be proud to be Basque. This is what our region's all about. This is the history of the region. And so it's quite rare for guys to want to leave. Obviously, when they get over that threshold, there's a switch where it goes from being a football fan to then being a footballer, a professional footballer. And they know that the careers are short and that the guys need to leave. So Llorente left and Ander Herrera. If the club was offering success and it was a mutual beneficial relationship between club and player, they wouldn't be leaving. They'd have no desire to leave. And unfortunately the way football is now, if a club is not offering its talent the potential for success, they will leave, regardless of how much the club means to them. But Athletic Bilbao, there's only them, Barcelona and Real Madrid, who've never been relegated from La Liga. So they are still a big club, and because of that, they're keeping these fantastic players. And everyone's talking about Inaki Williams now. I hope he stays, like Eichen Munier has stayed.
Yeah.
And I hope they have 15-year careers there, because it spits in the face of modern football, and it goes against the globalization of the game. So you've mentioned about you didn't realise certain bits and pieces within the Athletic Bilbao chapter, and I hope everyone who reads it didn't pick up things that they didn't realise, and I hope because of the book and because of this chapter in particular, there are hundreds more Athletic Bilbao fans than there ever was before, because they're a truly unique and special club.
Yeah, I mean, they have to be from the region to play for the team, or have at least a parentage or some
familial
sort of
ties.
Which is fantastic. And something else that I from that chapter that really kind of took my eye was that you said they teach the kind of the background and teaching the history of not just the area, but also of the club. Teaching their past successes, past failures, and I was curious of this sort of teaching of the history for youngsters at any club, for example Arsenal, right? If they're learning about kind of the 90s, or because a lot of these kids are 16, 18, they didn't grow, or even younger, they didn't grow up in watching, the teams of late, Arsene Wenger. Like, I mean, he's older. His career at Arsenal is even older than some of those kids. So do you think other clubs do that, like teach this sort of history, at least club history, can at least take some pride in that?
Oh, I know they do. Yeah, full well. Unfortunately, there's two types of football at the minute. There's modern day football and what went before. And a lot of these guys coming through now at clubs, a 16-year-old now can't even remember Istanbul and things like that.
Yeah, wow, yeah.
So clubs have to. It's imperative that they display their history. And I don't know how much that resonates with kids. It's different, per individual, of course. But the clubs now who are primed for success in the future are the clubs who are getting modern success. So Chelsea FC are a huge football club. Okay, so maybe they weren't big in the 90s and 80s and maybe early 2000s, but they're a huge football club now, and they're the clubs primed for success. So every single football club, not just in England but abroad, they have to display their history, of course, but they also have to offer something for the modern player. Now, it was interesting listening to Michael Beale yesterday on the radio, and he said he was working at Chelsea before, but he didn't know what youth development was in full until he came to Liverpool. And by that he meant that the guys he was developing at Chelsea were hitting glass ceilings, and they were getting retained and perhaps monopolised and sent out on loan, but they were not breaking through. Obviously, you got Chalobah and Loftus-Cheek are exceptions. Whereas he came to Liverpool and he saw what youth development was in full, and because Liverpool are offering players the opportunity to get into the first team. So while history is important, what you can give the player at present is bigger. And it's no surprise that you look at some of the best players in England now, they all come through at lower league level. Take Dele Alli, for example, who's the best young player in England. He came through at MK Dons a few years back. If he'd have been at Arsenal all the while, or Chelsea, or Man City even, there's a chance that Dele Alli would not be the player he is now.
Yeah. And then they always say, like, why didn't Team X sign him, when he was 16? But obviously he wouldn't be that player now if he had been signed by your Man United at age 16, because there isn't any Man United player that has come through recently and had that sort of success. But there's something.
There's Rashford, but they're few and far between these guys that go in to the Premier League and are perfectly suited for it, because they're going in and they're competing against Ibrahimovic, who's had a long, illustrious careers, and Coutinho. They're there at this world-class level. So if you're 18 and you're going in against 27-year-olds, it's difficult. There's also, if you think of a seesaw, the guys who are at the bottom of the seesaw going up are more likely to make it than the ones who are coming in at Premier League level. At the top of the seesaw, they have to go down, they have to go on loan, and a loan can be a stifling environment. If you come from a Crucible Theatre Premier League club and you're going on loan to a lower league environment, there's a chance you're not going to come back up that seesaw again, to continue with this metaphor, because it's so difficult.
I want to take it back to, we were talking about Athletic Bilbao before, and I want to take it back to something without making this an Athletic Bilbao advertisement, but they were, I noticed that they were restricting playing time to their players who didn't perform well in school.
Yeah.
And I just want to use that as a segue, besides to say that's, good to hear, but how important is training cognitive ability for these teams and these players?
Well, they believe, Athletic Bilbao, that cognitive ability is the most important thing, and that perhaps they're right, because in terms of modern teaching, we can give the guys the same technical ability that technical ability is obviously, a lot of it's natural, but anyone, right, let's use this loosely, any club can help develop a technical player. What Athletic Bilbao need to do is help create them and shape them as people. And they firmly believe they have the most intelligent group of young players in the world, because education is paramount for them. And obviously there are lobes within the prefrontal cortex that get opened when you are educating yourself, and that replicates on the pitch. Now, it's interesting. I've always thought this about players. Are the more intelligent players the better footballers? It's difficult to gauge unless you have them doing IQ tests and stuff. But I think it's probably correct. You know, it's no surprise that some of the best players who go on to have good careers as managers afterwards. Obviously, you think like it's shifted now. It used to be that a prerequisite to being a great manager was that you had a maybe less than illustrious playing career and you were able to focus on your managerial career. But look at the top guys now. And you look at Ancelotti, an unbelievable footballer, who's obviously an intelligent guy as a player. Pep Guardiola, Diego Simeone. So I think they're onto something there at Athletic Bilbao in valuing the importance of education. And that's something that other clubs should be looking to do. Clubs do it. You know, they educate the young players so that when they get released, they can go and get coaching qualifications and stuff elsewhere. Athletic Bilbao take it that much more serious because in the passage you've actually referenced, they say to their players, if you're not performing in school, you're not playing for us. It's an American, you're an American yourself, Josh. It's that emphasis on academia and education, which it's not been seen before in football, I don't think, other than Athletic Bilbao, that value of education.
So cognitive teams trying to coach cognitive ability like Athletic Bilbao, how would you suggest, I mean, you've visited so many of these clubs now, how would you suggest teams train the mental side of the game?
Right, that's difficult. I also come from an educative background as well. I've worked as a supply teacher in various schools. I've just been in a school for 3 years. It's very difficult to actually gauge and expand that. But what a lot of educative settings do is that they give the players, and they give, let's keep it in the context of players, they give them the answers. And the brain does not learn, it doesn't expand by being given the answers. It only expands by having to seek knowledge. So obviously a way of doing that would be, for instance, as a youth coach, never give them or tell them what they need to know. Let them find it themselves. It's something that the FA are aware of and try and implement. But that's got to carry on into classroom environments as well. And they've got to be coming up with things that obviously gauge the level of where the young player is at and what the next step is that he needs to learn, and come up with lessons and create an environment where he finds that next step himself. It's tough to actually to say to you it should be done this way, but because obviously every environment is different, but they do need to allow players to seek truths themselves and seek knowledge. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who was a teacher for a while, I mean, the best teachers are the students themselves. And so when you can foster that, student learning through student teaching, that's the best of both worlds. And it gives them that much more shared ownership over the experience.
It draws on something that actually Filippo Galli said at Milan. And he said that education, the word to educate comes from Latin for educere. I don't know if you read that chapter, which means to take out. And he used his pen like a wand, like he was Dumbledore or something, taking out knowledge. And he knows full well that is how it should be, and it relates that if you tell players what needs to be done, they won't learn. It's only from them finding out themselves and taking out that knowledge themselves that they do begin to learn.
Well, I mean, it just kind of occurred to me right now, but in theory, and this is just something I thought of at this moment, so it could be incredibly stupid and probably is, but in theory, if coaches taught players to be coaches or to think like coaches, wouldn't that make a bit more sense?
Yeah, and I've thought this for a while.
Okay.
No, you are onto something there. Obviously, you only have 90 minutes with a player in any one session, but there are opportunities to let the player be the coach, and it happens. You go and take the warm up, you take the cool down, or if a player's injured, get him involved in the process. help him draw up a session, let him coach, because it's only when you do become a coach, you go from being a player to a coach, that you do start to learn a lot about the game, and it opens up the brain more, as you're saying. And there are clubs that do that. They'll ask players to be involved in the process.
Can you mention them? Can you mention which clubs kind of foster?
From what I saw at Liverpool, it happens there, and I assume that most clubs would be doing the same thing as well. Obviously, you can't then make him be the coach and ask a player to take a 90-minute session, because that time is vital, and it's got to be the coach who's getting the best out of the player. But there are benefits to it, most definitely, Josh.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I remember, like they always tell teachers, like, have the kids, don't make the rules, but like have them, you can't just be the only one making the rules in the class. They have to mutually buy into that.
Which is a democracy, and it helps develop them as people as well.
Yeah, and it seems like the mental side of the game is lagging a bit behind the physical side. The strength and conditioning has come so far in recent years.
The four corners, obviously, it came from tactical periodization, and it got implemented even in the FA. The four corners, you have your physical, technical, tactical, and mental. It's easy to actually analyze 3 of them corners. So that's where the focus is. I can see that my under 8 has developed tactically, and I can see he's developed technically. So coaches they're getting measured themselves. They're focusing on these areas. There is still not enough of a focus on the mental side of the game, because how do you gauge it, and how do you analyze the mental side of the game? So you're right there. You're touching upon something that's quite interesting, and the mental side of the game does fall behind a little bit, apart from the clubs we've mentioned. Apart from the likes of Athletic Bilbao, they're investing in the kids because they see them as Basque sons, and they have a future that the club needs to protect, whether that's as a player or not. They can't be the club of Basque people if they're not developing good Basque people.
Yeah, I mean, you say for the future. I mean, they have a retirement home that they had.
That was Benfica.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's Benfica.
No, Benfica are quite an incredible club as well. I've never seen facilities like it, and I swear they were the most impressive club you could visit. I turned up and it was a sunny day, and you get the ferry over, and it was like an architect's dream in that every tree was planted as it should be, and the layout of the facilities, that again, it harbours youth football, and it harbours the adult game as well, and the pitches progress forward towards the river, and the first team play at the riverfront, and they overlook the city, so they can see that the city they represent glistening in the background.
Yeah, it sounded a little bit like football heaven when you described it in the book. I was just like imagining, like, on the Portuguese coast, which at least in my head I've never been, just sounds gorgeous, and like it just sounded a little bit like football heaven.
It was. I have to try and be impartial at every club, but I think it's obvious what clubs come across well, and Benfica are one of them. I really, really admire the club.
Yeah. One of the things that struck me about your book, and something that I really appreciated, because in this podcast, I try to get on all of the jobs, and I'm looking to get all the people that are involved in football that we don't hear about, that work behind the scenes. So we're, scouts, but not just scouts. I mean, people that handle all the video, and I haven't gotten to them yet, but I mean, I'm hoping to. But the people working behind the scenes, you got to talk to them. They, kind of welcomed you with open arms. Are there any that's probably too broad, but what jobs did you, I mean, even though you work in football, did you not fully appreciate until you got to sit down and talk with some of those people?
So I knew of the roles. I didn't know what they did day to day before I embarked upon the trip. But it's interesting how the video analyst guys, who whilst they sit there with a camera and they clip footage, they are as engaged in the development process as anyone else. As much so as the coaches. The coaches develop the sessions and help improve the players technically and tactically and what have you. But in terms of tactical periodization, a part of that is to structure training, and it cannot be done no more in the modern game without the video analysts and the performance analyst guys. Now, what they're doing, while they may be locked up in a dark room for hours on end, it's essential.
Can you explain why it's so essential?
So, on a first team level, they will say about the opposition, because there's different forms of analysis. We talk about the opposition. They will watch 10 to 15 games. They will highlight trends, tactical moves, formations. They will compile all this footage, make it concise, give it to the assistant manager, and the head of the analysis department will discuss what he's thought about as ways of conquering and beating the opposition. So he is actually engaged in how training is structured. And they'll spend hours doing this. And as soon as that video report is being handed over, because the analysts come from coaching backgrounds, it's still a gap in the market. There is no real analysis course, so to speak of. There's Prozone courses, but they're tailored for one type of analysis. So these guys are coaches, and they'll help structure training. And then as soon as they've handed their report over, they're looking at the next opponent after that. So they're spending hours in front of a screen. But it's more than that. It's not only are they just looking at a screen, they're helping formulate training in doing so. And they are the most essential cog, I'd probably say, at the minute.
Yeah, well, I mean, because there's just so many hours of football to be digested, and that can still only be done by the human eye. I know in the NBA in America in basketball, one of the best coaches in the league started as a video analyst at one of these clubs. I'm speaking of Eric Spoelstra for the Miami Heat. So you mentioned that there was a gap in the video analyst. In the video analyst role that you felt that there was. Can you explain what you meant by that gap? Because I wasn't entirely sure what you meant, and because usually gaps can be exploited, so I'm just curious as to what.
So when you're a multi-millionaire and you've created this gap, you filled it. Remember me, Josh?
Yeah.
If you want to be a coach, you train. You do coaching courses. If you want to be a scout, the FA do have scouting courses now that are coming through. And plus, obviously, the head of academy will not dictate, that's probably the wrong word for it, but will set a vision for what you are looking for as a player and will guide you. If you want to be an analyst, there's not a great deal out there. So Prozone do tactical analysis courses, but there's different forms of analysis, and not all clubs use Prozone. Some clubs use Scout 7 and Y Scout and other forms of software. So therefore, does every software provider offer courses? They don't. So there's probably maybe a 4 or 5 day course that could be done, which will cover the different forms of analysis, such as, oppositional analysis, scouting, statistical, which it all needs covering. So it's difficult how these guys come to get involved. They come from university backgrounds, but not all university courses cover these parts, because maybe a university course has access to Y Scouts but not Prozone, and it varies club on club.
Yeah. No, thanks. That's a very thorough breakdown, because it wasn't quite clear to me. You interviewed a lot of really interesting people in the book, and they mentioned a lot of really interesting people. We're talking about some of the best coaches ever. I mean, you mentioned previously all the different Italian coaches like Carlo Ancelotti and whatnot, and I mean there was one part where you break down Mourinho and his like seven keys to winning a big game, which I have down here just because I just thought it was fascinating, and I was like, oh, it makes all the sense why he always plays like that, even if I don't agree with it. But who is the most interesting person that you spoke to, and then who is the person that they might have mentioned that you really wanted to learn more about, that maybe you did research after?
It's interesting, even though he's deceased, how often Johan Cruyff came up at every club. And, it doesn't matter what capacity that the staff members were working in. People referenced Cruyff vision a lot. Even so, you've mentioned there the Mourinho, the 7 points. But the guy I was speaking to, he was from the Cruyffian vision and the Cruyff way of playing football. So he's one guy that he's a man that comes up a lot throughout the book. And also you mentioned about the Italian coaches. So Filippo Galli, when I met with him, he explained that the Milan vision is all still aligned with that of what Arrigo Sacchi did and Fabio Capello. So the legacy that these great coaches have had, truly great coaches, the legacy is still felt at a lot of clubs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're like little coaching trees. The people that were with them when they were there, are still there, and I mean, there's still plenty of remnants at each club. But is there someone that, like, after you wrote the book, some people mentioned? I guess you mentioned kind of Cruyff, but that you really wanted to read about after that you hadn't heard of, or like that someone mentioned that you're like, oh, I have to really read more about this person. They sound fascinating.
Yeah. So Vitor Frade, who did the tactical periodization concept, who came up with that, to help assist with that chapter, I had to study so much about him, because all the information that I gathered from Matos, who's the guy who I interviewed at the time, all that information didn't really make a great deal of sense until I had to go and study. And Frade is an unbelievable guy, Vitor Frade. The way he's advanced football, it's continental wide now. The stuff he's developed, his concept, used to be felt in Portugal, and it's shifted over to Spain, and now it's everywhere.
Can you just kind of, I mean, because we've danced around what exactly his radical or concept, or that has revolutionized a lot of the continental football. I know it's a complex subject, but can you at least broadly talk about what it is that he did?
So if you envision, have you ever seen The Damned United?
I actually have not.
It's quite a good film, but the way that footballers used to get ready for the upcoming season.
Oh wait, yeah, no, I have, yeah, definitely, yeah.
Clough has them running up and down.
Yeah.
The stairs in the stadium, and they were developing purely physically, and they were looking to develop and get ready for the new season in a physical capacity, and then they go and work on the tactics, and then they go and work on the technique and do five-a-side. Why, and this was what Frade pondered, why would you train all these different parts of the game individually? Because when you are playing football, you are using them all at once. And you're using the technical, tactical, and mental. And that's what his philosophy is all about, his tactical periodization, is that it's training all different parts of football, all the different facets at once, to create sessions that bring all the different sides of the game in together. And the Portuguese coaches are absolutely fantastic at doing that. So when I reference it in Didier Drogba's autobiography, is when he turns up for training. He'd come from Marseille, who'd done fantastic in the UEFA Cup that season. I think did they win it, or they got to the final?
No, I thought they got to the final, but they don't. I don't think they won it. No.
He lit up the competition, and everyone was talking about Drogba at the time. Chelsea were fortunate in that they signed him. He'd come from France, and when he arrived in England, he brings his running shoes, and he sees Mourinho, and Mourinho stops him in the corridor and says, "What are you doing with them?" Because the way I train. Obviously, Mourinho was a disciple of Frade. The way I train, you don't need your running shoes, you need your boots, because everything's tailored to football. And now that is the way clubs operate. That is the common way that clubs work now.
Yeah, no, actually, when I read that part of the book, it was quite striking, because I actually did a podcast with Adi Mafi, who was the fitness coach at Chelsea. From 1996 to 2005, and he talked about that he was a sprinter and he went to the Olympics. But when he went to Chelsea, they just did sprinting, conditioning, and like he said, and just do running exercises. And it wasn't until Rui Ferreira and Jose Mourinho came where they did these integrated workouts that were football, but they were still conditioning at the same time. And he directly mentioned that. And at the time, I didn't understand where it had come from. Not them, but Vitor Frade. But it was, so when I read that like a big grin came on my face, because I was like, I know exactly what he's talking about. Like, yeah, so it's amazing, like, how it was two separate things, and because it seems so obvious now. Like,
aren't the best ideas always the most obvious, though?
I know.
And the guy, what was his name? Sorry,
Adi Mafi.
He will have seen football evolve in that. What was it? 9 years? Did you say?
10 years. He was, when he first got there. There was only one other fitness coach in England, and he was only hired because Ruud Gullit was used to them in Italy. In Italy, they had like fitness coaches, especially fitness coaches, but in England they hadn't, and so he wanted a fitness coach, and so they hired him. So he was there for the whole.
He will have seen the introduction of dietitians. He will have seen English football evolve in them years like never before, never after. It was like getting taken out of the dark ages, because analysis won't have been there when he was there. Training will have been purely five-a-side games, and then maybe a couple of sessions up against the opposition. So it's interesting that he said that when Mourinho arrived with Rui Ferreira, that would have been like the big bang, because they're both disciples of Vitor Frade as well.
Yeah.
So going back to the earlier question, talking about the influence of certain guys in football, Cruyff and Vitor Frade, they're huge, and they come out in the book as well.
Yeah, no, it was fascinating to hear that, especially I mean, I'm too young, we're pretty much the same age. We didn't grow up watching Cruyff, and the more you hear about it, the more he's just like this even more legendary figure. Something else that struck me about the book was you go into managers and a kind of a comparison in Italy and the UK, and how in Italy it's very common for managers to start off in like super small teams and like the lower leagues, like the 4th division, 5th division, almost like tiny clubs, and that's where they get their kinks out. And so by the time that they're actually ready to manage, they're at a bigger club. And how in England they work more with youth teams and really are at bigger clubs, but at the bigger clubs youth teams, and don't really have that ability to kind of work out all of the kinks. And it seemed like that was a real reason why they were so successful in Italy, amongst many reasons, but that particularly struck out to me.
Yeah, it was very interesting that while I was discovering that, at the very same time Gary Neville had taken the Valencia job, and yeah, maybe he deserved it because he's an unbelievably knowledgeable guy, and he's worked with the best manager of all time. But and obviously Valencia is a difficult place to work because how many other managers got sacked before and after Neville. But to be working in that spotlight and developing as a football manager in such an environment, you're only destined to fail. I firmly believe that. Whereas in Italy, the very best managers, the World Cup winning managers, and all the guys I've referenced, they start off at the lower level. So Ancelotti even says so himself that he was working on himself day to day, and he had flaws, and he couldn't believe that his players didn't see these flaws, but he was able to work on them. And he's the best manager in the world right now, Ancelotti, because there's no player who's playing at the top level who's an elite player that he hasn't really had any association with. There's the Barcelona guys, but other than that, Ancelotti goes to each club and he leaves them in a better state. And that probably, that man management ability that he has come from his early days as a provincial manager. Whereas in England, so the issue with Italian coaches doing that is, as they say at Juventus, it makes the youth sector less effective because the players are not getting that attention. It's always for the adult sector. So adult football is brilliant and the coaches are brilliant, but they're not focusing on the youth enough. Whereas in England, and I mentioned Brendan Rodgers, I talk about, well, there's other coaches, there's Steve Holland, there's Paul Clement. They come from a youth level and they go forward in that way. So the youth sector in England is very good. Although we might not always see it because there's not always the opportunity for the guys. The standard of young Premier League players is as good as it's ever been, and the future's only going to be bright because of that in England. Whereas in Italy, they're worried now, and I've spoken to Juventus about this, they are worried that they're not going to produce the players that they have in the past. Football's evolved. When it was a slower sport, they had these incredible tactical players. Now they're trying to create technical players. And they're worried that football's evolving and they might get left behind.
You actually found in the book that Bayern Munich is actually kind of the opposite, that they've found a what looks like a pretty a good way of working with their local population and keeping that identity, and in fact even maybe embracing or making it better. And so if you could just share a little bit about what you found on the other side with Bayern Munich, that would be fantastic.
So the differences between Bayern Munich and PSG, first of all, Bayern Munich Stadium is maybe 30,000 capacity bigger than that at PSG, so they can allow for more fans to enter. Also, Munich's a really wealthy place. The suburbs of Paris are poor. Munich and Bavaria in general is quite a well-off place, so fans can pay ticket prices without as much complaint as elsewhere. Fan groups in Germany, they're allowed a little bit more autonomy. They can wave their banners, they can create the tifos and such, which, if we talk about England, you can't take a flag in without it being checked or what it says. There's no political attachment to it. So in Germany they do this. They give fans and fan groups a bit more autonomy. And PSG, if we go back to Paris Saint-Germain, they banned the fan groups. So because there was the hooligan element attached to them. And also what I mentioned when I talk about Bayern Munich, which is incredible about them, is how open and liberal they are for fans to go and watch them train, which took Pep Guardiola totally aback when he became the manager there. He wasn't used to his training sessions being so accessible, to the extent that Bayern Munich will go on their website and weekly update it to say when training is, what time to arrive, and they'll even give fans maps and say this is how you get here from the stadium. It's such a brilliant concept that fans can turn up and watch the players train and have beers with them. Well, not beers with them. They can have beers and watch them play. And then afterwards,
that'd be pretty crazy if you could just sip a beer with Pep Guardiola on the sideline.
That would be a dream, of course.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if PSG started selling that soon. But
well, they also designate players to stay behind and go and take selfies with fans and sign autographs at the end of each training session, which PSG is a bit like English clubs in that the superstars don't get that public access. So obviously the German model, if you're a fan, you're looking at it and you're thinking that's the way forward. That's the way all clubs should be now.
So, you've been a scout. I mean, granted, you're not a South American scout, so you won't maybe be an expert at breaking this down. But I was curious by something that you had in the book, which was you delved into Juventus's scouting system and discussed on how in South America you can't get someone before the age of 18 because of rules. But the way around that is Juventus looks for people in South America with Italian heritage, and that is a way around that. And so I was really curious, and because national teams do this too, how do clubs find players with an Italian heritage? It's not like everyone on scouting these scouting databases has their family tree and heritage just on there. So how do they find these guys?
Yeah, I imagine they don't compile a database of guys who are just from Italian backgrounds first and foremost. I think they'll look for players that they like and admire, and then they'll check if it's a feasible option to take them. You know, there's a lot in Argentina. Otamendi springs to mind, who come from these Italian
like
grandfathers.
And,
Icardi. I think Zanetti before him as well. That they'll look for a player, and if they like him, then they'll check with the club. So, for instance, Vélez, Sarsfield, they'll ask the club, and they'll have contacts there, and they'll have the player's passport on file at the club. So there are ways around it. I don't think they have this huge database of Italian passport guys. It's not like Football Manager, unfortunately, where you can put in the nationalities. They'll look for a player who they like first, and then see if they can piece it.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. I mean, it just sounds so like I felt really stupid asking that question, but it's something you always hear about, and then you just wonder like how do they know?
It's not a stupid question at all. No.
And then kind of similarly, they have these databases and with all of these highlights and game film of all these players, but you have to check the mental component, and that's something that doesn't come out as much on game film, especially when the camera's tracking the ball so much. So how do these clubs check the mental capacity of players overseas, or just ones that they don't see in person? And even when they do see them in person, without talking to them, how can they check their mental makeup?
So there's certain things that you can see in person that you cannot see obviously watching a game of football. So I remember when I was working at Liverpool, and you couldn't see on television, but Javier Mascherano didn't stop. He was always chasing, filling space. Off camera, he never stood still. And obviously that tells you something about his mental fortitude, his mental capacity, in that he never wants to stop. And you can see when you go and see a player live, is he talking to his teammates, is he barking orders at them? Desire comes through like this. So Juventus will, and most clubs I assume, will watch video footage of a player first, because it's expensive to fly. They can't fly all the time on tips. They watch players first, then they go and see them live, and they'll see if his mental capacity comes out in his mannerisms and the way that he acts and his desire. And there are also other ways of doing it. They will speak to people who work around a player. So with Tevez, for example, they spoke with people at Man City who really were with him day to day, and they said that his desire is incredible. There's no worries about that with him. And this is something that scouts have done for many years. There's a book, The Secret Diary of a Liverpool Scout, I don't know if you've read it, about a scout called Jeff Twentyman. And what he'd do, he'd turn up, and sometimes players know a scout's going to be there. So he asks fans, what's he like? Tell me about him. And that's the best way of getting a picture of players, is by speaking with people and seeing them in a live context, more than watching analysis footage. And I don't think any player gets signed without being live scouted. I don't think that players are signed, other than probably Ali Dia years ago, on word of mouth and seeing videos of them.
There's this versatility. You have a whole section about in Austria about David Alaba and his versatility and how he could play any position. And I'm an avid basketball fan, and in the NBA, players' positions is becoming increasingly irrelevant, and there's a lot more positionless basketball. And so in my opinion, and I don't like to get too far into my opinion in football, because I'm not nearly as knowledgeable as people like yourself or other people I've interviewed, but it seems that football is getting more going in the same direction, where there's less focus on position or being just versatile and can play all over the pitch.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know about basketball, but there's got to be certain players who stay as a point of reference, that if the right back goes up and he interchanges position, that there's got to be a point of reference player who can allow to fill in. I don't know if it works like that. So, for example, if the left back goes up, the whole midfielder will sit in. That total football way that the game's played. But definitely, you're right in the sense that all players should feel comfortable in all contexts. In that, if I'm a centre back, I should be able to, because a context will emerge in a game, receive the ball with me back to goal. Say we've had a corner, it's gone out, it's come back into me. I should be able to receive the ball with my back to goal. So there's a balance as well, and this comes up in the Austria-Vienna chapter. Do you develop players who are specialised in one position, who will become world class as, say, a centre-back? Or do you develop them to be versatile players who are fantastic in numerous positions? And the way football's going now, with the demands physically on players, that there's going to be opportunities to play in different positions, and you've got to develop guys to be more versatile.
I want to get into a couple of my just things that I really enjoyed about the book that are kind of just random all over the place. So bear with me. There's a great quote that the Rayo Vallecano coach Paco Gémez said, and for the record, I've been to a Rayo Vallecano game at great ground and really enjoyed it there. His quote was, "I've always said that the job of a coach is more important above all when the team doesn't have the ball. When you've got the ball, you're more dependent on the player's talent." Do you agree with that statement, and why? Because it seems that like some of the people in the book, like even Pep Guardiola, who he kind of shares similarities with, wouldn't even necessarily agree with that.
I think Pep would agree to an extent in that his primary focus is developing players' defensive set pieces first and foremost, the defensive phase of the game. He wants to create this backbone of knowledge, how the players cope without the ball in the defensive capacities. I think what he's trying to do there, Paco Gémez, and I thought this at the time, is give credit to the players, because what I did actually see him do was stop and show the movements off the balls and underlaps and, and different positional aspects. So I think he's trying to give a lot of credit to the players there. But what he's saying is that in the first 2/3, it's very important for the coach that he can develop his guys to build up from the back, to get into the second third into midfield, have a bit of circulation and possession of the ball, but make that circulation positive so that when he gets into the final third, what he's trying to say is that he gives his players a little bit of autonomy. I've used that word a lot today. He's trying to give them a bit of freedom so that they can allow their creative side to come out.
Yeah. No, I mean, I would agree, and I think most coaches would. It just struck me because he's very similar to Pep Guardiola, and it seems like a lot of their time was spent on the ball. There's another thing that really interests me. There's just so many, like, I want to say throwaway comments, but just like small little tidbits of your book that just really stuck out to me in a really good way. I noticed you even mentioned captains in England and versus Spain, and how they're selected was different, and how in Spain they're democratically elected by the players, which is how I grew up with them. But in England, they're really kind of not. They're really selected by either the coach or just the organization in general. And did you notice that it was maybe better in one country, or did you look for that in other countries as well?
So England is a maritime country, and the captain is an extension of in football is an extension of the manager, and I think they looked at it previously in a leadership capacity that the manager picks all. Obviously, they don't have managers abroad, they have coaches. In England, we have managers who manage everything. That the manager decides everything, and if he was to second guess himself, he wouldn't be a leader. So he then decides who his captain is. I personally like, as a democratic human being, I like what they do in Spain and other countries, and like you say, in the States. I think that's the right way of doing it. That if you've selected the captain yourself and he's not up to task as a manager, you are then accountable. Whereas if that responsibility is shared amongst the players and you all decide together, yeah, okay, we'll have Josh as captain, you've decided. And then if you're not up to the role as captain, it's the player's responsibility. I think that is a much better way of doing it than manager's picking him himself, and the fans get on his back if he's not up to the job. Even the captain himself might not be up to the task. Whereas if the players have picked him and he's got the players backing,
and
then straight away he's onto a winner.
Yeah, he might feel emboldened only because he has the players' confidence.
Definitely a good way of putting it, yeah.
Something else that really struck me, you talked to an Italian journalist. I'm going to butcher his last name right now, Di Marzio.
Yeah.
Who confirmed for the readers that agents sometimes promote false rumors to push a deal through, and that he will run with it in order to gain their favor. When he told you that, were you just flabbergasted that he was? Because when I read that, I was like, wait, he was just willing to admit it. I was pretty.
I know. And then I sent it to him a manuscript. I said, "Is this okay to publish?" And he said, "Yeah, it's fine, don't worry." So he's so confident, and that's the way that things are. That DiMarzio was actually a brilliant guy to meet. Absolutely fantastic. I don't know if it comes across in the book, but he's so forthcoming. And it's interesting. I don't know whether that's the same in England or everywhere else. I assume it probably is. That he will publish a story, say, even though he knows it's false, so that he may be in the favour of the club, that when it becomes official elsewhere, he'll be the first to announce it. So let's talk about Dani Alves now. There was rumours he was going to Man City. He might publish that, even though, and say, yeah, City wants, even though he knows in the background that he's going to go to PSG. Because then PSG will tell him first, and he'll be the first one to admit it. Which leaves us as fans sitting here thinking, what do we believe? Who do we trust? What do we believe? And I'd just say to fans, don't believe anything until you see him holding the shirt. Don't get yourselves excited over transfers. It doesn't really matter. Until you see that guy holding the shirt, assume it's not going to happen. I think that's what DiMarzio kind of confirms as well when he talks to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, he totally did. It's just, as a fan myself, it can be hard sometimes to feel that way. Some other things that... I mean, you talk to so many interesting people. Agents. I mean, there was a great chapter on agents that we could talk to. But there was one thing that really did really present itself as pretty striking to me. You had Rasmus Ankersen, the author of The Goldmine Effect, kind of involved in or just mentioned in the book, and there was a quote which was. From his book, which was, "A performance environment should not be designed for comfort, but for hard work. It has to show people that the road to success is long and uncomfortable." And, you mentioned Benfica earlier and how just world-class the facilities were. Do modern facilities fly in the face of this? I mean, we see, so often, footballers that come from, backgrounds where that's unnecessary. I mean, is this all kind of for naught?
You're right. They do fly in the face of that. There's a danger giving all players the best of everything, because then where is the mental fortitude when they become a player? Where's their ability to handle pressure? Because they've never had to feel that before. Obviously, they felt pressure, but becoming a Premier League and having Premier League pressure is totally different. And that's what makes that entire Feyenoord chapter so striking, is that it does fly in the face of the trends of modern football. That Feyenoord, they have weeds growing through the concrete slabs on the floor. That equipment's kept in rusty containers. That they play outside, and it is so. It just all seems so second-hand in comparison to the unbelievable facilities felt a little bit later at Ajax, where Ajax have indoor domes that are made like a giant bouncy castle, that are blown up, and inside there's this incredible pitch, and it's all fantastic. Feyenoord don't have that at all, and it's interesting. It really is interesting to see them two chapters, especially how they run opposite to each other. Did you notice that yourself when you were reading it?
Yeah,
Josh,
that's what struck. I mean, that it was very striking. I mean, when you're giving that description of Feyenoord and then earlier in the book, just ogling essentially like Benfica, and how they're both producing, similar talent, more or less, and Yeah, is it because it makes you just think in the end, is it even worth it, or is it even necessary to have these extravagant facilities?
Yeah, which is what Rasmus Ankersen says when he talks about going to Jamaica and where Usain Bolt trained, and there was just a rusty weight bench and a faded old track. That is there a danger in giving players the best of everything? Potentially, there probably is. So a balance needs to be struck, and I know in Liverpool what they did. Yeah, the facilities are amazing. They had some of the guys who were approaching professional ages working as volunteers in a homeless shelter, giving out food, because they've got to ensure that while we give them the best of everything, they're developing as people at the same time. The final guys are tough. They've won the best academy in Holland 6 years, 6 years consecutively. So what they're doing, yes, it's right in what they're doing because they're getting awards from it. But they also get to a point whereby some young players will want to leave because they'll be drawn to. So when I was there, the best player there was a guy called Chong. He went to Man United because maybe he got fed up of playing outside in the hail. So where's that balance? You want to be attractive to players, but you don't want them to be mollycoddled and babied and have the best of everything. Also, you don't want to go too far to the other side like Feyenoord and not give them anything good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, I read this book about Roy Oldfield, which was this groundsman for Burnley recently, because I was going to talk to Dave Thomas, this author. He's written like 16 books about Burnley. Fascinating guy, and really, really interesting. And in the book, they're talking about all of the players are apprentices. And so they would clean the stadium after a match, and they would help the groundsman do all of his work when they weren't playing. And, I mean, I can't even imagine the uproar that would cause today. But even just like you said, going to a homeless shelter, is a step in the direction of that.
Yeah, that was a big thing throughout the 80s and 90s in football, was the apprenticeship scheme. That, for example, a young guy will come through, and I think Gerrard cleaned Jamie Redknapp's boots and such stuff like that, which makes them have that bit of desire and know that they've got a bit of work to do to get to where they need. The PFA introduced certain regulations that improved standards for players and created player power, so to speak, which coincided with the Bosman ruling at the time. And I think it was made illegal for these practices to take place. But Southampton are a club I know who are trying to bring it back and have players do not so much apprenticeships by name, but some of the tasks by nature, because it does develop them well as human beings. It's the same as you and I, whatever we have to do, whatever field. If you want to be a journalist, then you do the dirty jobs first. You do enveloping and stuff. And if you want to become an MP, you go canvassing first. You work as a local councillor. You do the dirty jobs first to work your way up. In football, without them apprenticeship schemes, there was no dirty jobs. That they were going from being pampered as a player to being pampered, as a youth player, to being pampered as a senior player. And for a lot of fans, they can't resonate with the modern player because they don't see themselves as the same type of human being. Whereas what we had before, you had guys who fans could really, really empathise with. I don't think they see themselves in some of the modern players anymore.
I would definitely agree as a fan. It seems like there's that disconnect with players and fans these days. I want to get actually back. I can't believe I forgot to ask you about this. All about the inspiration for the book and where that came from, because we kind of just skipped that whole part. But where did the idea for the book come?
So I was going to do it anyway. I was always wanted to go on a trip around Europe, but I also wrote a bit, and I was writing. I had my own website. I was writing for different other websites. Fortunately, I think the concept for the book was that huge that I got a publisher out of it, and I got a book deal. And I was able then to go to these clubs and really cement my place there by saying, I've got these publishers. So it was a bit of a gamble at the time, to be honest. While I was contacting publishers, I told them I had these clubs and I didn't have them cemented, but but I was also telling the clubs then that I had the publishers. Thankfully, it came together in the end, and the book, has come out as it has done. But I was always going to do it, Josh, whether I wrote about it or not. I was always going to have this trip. I'm just glad that, I've been able to write it, and it's come out quite good in the end.
Yeah, fake it till you make it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Is there a place that really, when you look back, you're like, man, that kind of was head and shoulders above the rest in terms of enjoyment or just the experience you got there?
Wow. I've said it before, and we seem to narrow in on these same clubs. Well, I do personally. I talk about maybe 4 or 5 clubs over and over again, but Benfica was incredible, and I talk about, you've read it yourself, when I go into the 360-degree room, where it's this walled off room with LED lights, and it cost $1 million US, I think they said, to build, and you stand in the middle and the lights fall and you're stood in darkness and you listen for a whistle and these machines start firing balls out of cannons at you, and there's a scenario on the nets and little mini goals, and you have to take a touch and have a shot, and there's hundreds of practices you can do. You could bring it down on the chest and volley it. There's so many different things that they have them doing. And I'm stood there, and they've just signed this guy Jovic for however many £1 million, and I'm watching him play, and then they say to me, "Okay, your turn now." And I was not expecting it whatsoever. I'm wearing a shirt, I'm wearing brogues, but they let me have a go. And Benfica are the friendliest club, the loveliest staff who work there, that they know what football is, and football is for the people, and football is a source of joy, and that's how it should be, and it shouldn't take itself so seriously. And Benfica really reflect that. And even if I'm saying this now, and I hope that a few people are listening and start to think what a lovely club they are, because Benfica are brilliant. And they are the one club for me who I keep coming back to. No disrespect to the other clubs, but Benfica went above and beyond in terms of accommodating me.
And so, I mean, did you? How did you do in the 360? Did you light it up?
No comments.
Fair enough. I mean, planning just on a even slightly different level, planning a trip like that, I mean, in 3 months is quite difficult. How long did it take you to plan that whole adventure?
Altogether, in terms of writing and planning and being on the trip, it was about 20 months in total. I'd say it took maybe 6 months to plan. Yeah, and about 12 months to write the book as well. I was writing as I was going. Each club I visited, I was going back to the hotel room and I was chronicling my experience. And even doing it as I went, it still took so long to write.
Why is that?
I'm not a writer by trade. I had to study a lot and work hard at, sentence structures and perfection and flow and stuff, which was quite difficult to do. So as I'm writing, I'm reading and I'm studying and I'm looking where each exclamation mark goes and such, which took a long time as well to become a writer as well as to be a coach and scout.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're an expert writer, I mean, writing is still never an easy task at all. Which chapter or what part of the book, if I told you had to write another one, would you want to explore more, or would you write a book about?
I go into Eastern European football more. I touched, probably the furthest I went was to Budapest. And there's so much more to be explored. The further east you go, I could go to Dynamo Kiev. I'd love to go to Zenit St. Petersburg, to Red Star Belgrade. And I think there's a huge vacancy there in parts of Europe to go to. That while it's interesting to go and see the best teams in the world and what they do, a lot of that's an amalgamation of sameness. Whereas there's some methods out in the Far East which haven't been explored, really, to be honest. I think you could do a whole book on Red Star Belgrade, Partizan Belgrade as well. It's not just how the socio-economic environment there creates the fans, the fanaticism that they have, but also how they develop players. That would be truly interesting. So there's probably room for a European game 2.0. But I think that would take a few years, Maybe let the dust settle before embarking around Europe again.
Yeah, and even, who knows, South America, Asia. I mean, there's, all different kinds you could you could do. What were there any questions that you still had after going to these places or seeing these clubs that you still had that were unanswered?
It's like anyone, when you speak to someone and then you walk away and think, I should have said that. It was like that at a lot of clubs. So any of the vacant questions that I had at one club, I was trying to get answered at other clubs. So I like to think that everything that I kind of had that I wanted to ask has come out in the end in the book.
Is there something you're curious about now, or something that you want to learn more about or explore more going forward?
It's tough to say, because I've touched on a hell of a lot. I've talked about scouting, I've talked about youth development. Maybe there's more I'd like to learn about leadership styles and management. Because the guy I met with, Paco Gemes, he cites his philosophy and his way of working as his main, his leadership quality, and he gets the players to invest in that way of working. Whereas there's some coaches out there, I'm sure they don't have a clear idea of how they want a team to play at every club. Like Pep Guardiola goes to every club, it's the Pep way. You get guys, Ancelotti goes to certain clubs and he reinvents himself. I would love to discover how managers like that do it, how they reinvent themselves and how they lead the modern player and get them eating out the palm of the hand. Because he does that, Ancelotti, and other coaches do that. And that would be something I'd like to discover, is some leadership styles out there.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, and it transcends all fields, the different types of leadership examples that you could follow. If someone, I mean, just as someone who has been a scout, and how would you advise someone, let's just say, who's graduating school right now, and they just said it, I wanted to become a scout for, insert club X, Manchester United or Chelsea. How would you recommend, what route would you recommend they go? Would video analyst route? Would you recommend taking coaches course? What?
I've had this question asked. I can only answer it from youth scouting. Okay, have a niche. So are you working in schools and coming across players that other people aren't? What's your niche? Do you have a futsal team? Because not everyone's looking at futsal all over the nation. They are in Liverpool. We have a great futsal league. Or be a coach. Have a team. Get some of the best players in your league to come and play, and get them coming to you that way. Because clubs will come to you. If you're doing well enough at whatever your niche is, clubs will come and find you, and you'll build up contacts that way. So even if you want to be a scout, get the best under-6 team in the league, and they'll come talking to you. And, and that's how it works, I'm afraid.
Yeah, under-6, wow.
Or younger, under 5. It's being known.
Oh, wow, God. Where do you see yourself, speaking of under 5, where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years? Or where do you want to be in 10 years?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm interested in the minute. I'm still a scout first and foremost. I'm interested in recruitment. Where do I want to be in 5 years? I couldn't tell you. And I've always been like this. Even in school, they ask, what do you want to do in life and stuff. I knew I wanted to work in football. I didn't know what capacity. But I'd like life to be flexible. I'd like it to be exciting and different. That I don't know what I'm going to be doing 5 years from now. And if I knew that, I wouldn't be happy, because that would be a long 5 years, knowing that it was leading up to this moment. I'd like it to be spontaneous.
Okay. And what? I mean, and this is a real long question. What do you want your football legacy to be?
That's an interesting question. I got asked this a few years back, and I said that I'd just love to assist Liverpool Football Club in any way, and that I'd lay my life down for the benefits of the club.
Bend your knee and just
very Game of Thronesy. I offer my sword to
I
the
know.
club.
I know. I've been watching the whole last season this past week.
Yeah, I'm like Brienne of Tarth in that sense. So, I'm just
Exactly.
offering my sword
to whomever.
to Liverpool. And now, having seen all these different clubs across the world, I haven't thought about it much. I'd be happy to work anywhere. I do want to see more of the world. I don't like the way the world is changing. And if we get deep, the world's becoming insular. It's becoming more hateful. And I don't like the way things are going. That I would like to see the world before it continues to be this closed-off place that it's becoming. Obviously, we've got Brexit. You have to suffer Donald Trump. You're banning Muslims at the airport. I don't want to get political about it, but the world is becoming closed off. That I'd like to maybe use football as a vehicle to then go and explore the world while I still can do.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
It's such a interesting thing, and we won't get into it just because that's its own podcast into itself, and there's plenty of smart people doing that, but
Yes, exactly.
globalization and yet insular, but
Yeah, globalization being something that's kind of coming in on itself. That's how it's looking at the moment. Yeah, good way of putting it.
and if you could have dinner with three people, either three people that you met from the book or just or non-football people, who would you have dinner with? And you can't say family because or any like extremely close friend, because I mean that might be a given. So
Can they be deceased?
of course.
Okay, good. Cruyff. And, I was speaking to his charity and the Cruyff Foundation. I said, I'm coming to the Netherlands. And I had a bite. And he said, get back in touch nearer to the time and we'll see. And there was an opportunity that I might have got to meet the great man. And I never, unfortunately, in Milan, a month or so before I was due to be there, he'd passed away. And no one knew how unwell he was. There were reports he was doing better. Cruyff would be one. Bill Shankly, I think what he did to this club, that even now you could read his quotes and still be inspired by them. And this was 50, 60 years ago. This was a different era altogether. And a third one, I'd like to pick the brains of Sir Alex Ferguson, in that even now he's selling out these Harvard conferences of guys who want to progress in the business world, who want to be political leaders. They're looking at this man from Glasgow, who has gone above and beyond what anyone expected from him as a manager. He's got the biographies out there and you read them, but I'd love to sit and pick his brains about how so people talk about, let me just go off the grain a bit, how do you keep Messi motivated to keep winning the Ballon d'Or and the Champions League? How do you keep someone who's won it? How do you keep him inspired to keep winning it? Alex Ferguson was the man who was inspiring these players to keep winning it, despite the fact he'd already won it himself. And I'd love to know how he did that and how strong mentally he is to being able to do that. So them three, Cruyff, Ferguson and Shankly, we'd have a fantastic dinner.
it would be really interesting. Who knows? Once upon a time, they might have had a dinner. At least a couple of them.
That'd be amazing to think, wouldn't it?
And is there anything that you would like to ask from the crowd, or ways people can find you or interact with you?
Find me on LinkedIn. Find me on Twitter. Ask the crowd. That's a tough one. Just be nice to people. that would be my request to the crowd. No, I've thoroughly enjoyed doing this, Josh. It's been great, and I don't know if the listeners can tell, we've had locals coming and going. We're in a pub which is the oldest pub in Liverpool. It's older than America. The barman has come over and give us a plate of sausage.
Yeah, a little tapas. I feel like I'm back in Spain right now.
Yeah. So I'd like to apologise to the people listening if it's not as clear as it possibly can be, but there's a nice homely atmosphere here. So contact me on LinkedIn, Twitter. If you ever come to Liverpool, I'd be happy to meet up and chat with people.
Yeah, and I'm not saying go read the book, but check it out. I thought it was quite good.
I like to think there's a little bit in the book for everyone. Someone's going to pick up that book and discover something that they didn't know before. No matter if they're an international manager or a grassroots coach who's just interested in football or a fan. I like to think there's stuff in there that people didn't know before. So yeah,
and
buy the book.
Yeah, and I bet you've probably heard that every person you've talked to has probably had like a different favorite part. So, it stands on that merit. Well, thanks for doing this.
Thank you very much, Josh, for having me.
If you liked the show, didn't like the show, have any feelings at all, leave me a message at Football Autobio on Twitter or the Football Autobiography Show on Facebook. You can also find more episodes online at www.footballautobiographyshow.com. And please let me know what you think of the show. If there's any guests that you want to hear on the show, I want to make this show better for you. So you know where to find me on social media, and drop me a comment.